Hi, I'm Britta Cook-Brzezina. I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Educational Psychology, Special Education track. I'm also a scholar with the National Center for Leadership in Intensive Intervention. I will be presenting on a systematic literature review that I am in the process of finalizing, along with my advisor and co-author, Dr. Kristen McMaster. While many students experience growth in response to receiving intensive reading comprehension interventions, a small but significant number of students do not. These students are often termed non-responders for the failure of the intensive intervention to produce sufficient growth. This is a problem because we know that having poor reading skills is associated with continued difficulties throughout school and on into employment. The purpose of our review is to identify the domain general cognitive and language and literacy characteristics of students for whom generally effective intensive reading comprehension interventions prove insufficient. Once identified, these characteristics could ultimately be used to optimize intensive interventions and aid in service delivery. While previous reviews have identified characteristics of non-responders, these reviews have focused on non-response to early literacy interventions in early elementary grades. There is a need to extend this literature to reading comprehension interventions and beyond the elementary grades, because reading comprehension requires additional component skills beyond those required for early literacy tasks. Also, the relation between various reading skills changes over time as skills develop, and students who continue to require intensive interventions beyond elementary school years likely have more intractable skill needs. Therefore, the current review focuses on non-response to intensive reading comprehension intervention and did not limit grade level. As such, to our knowledge, this is the first literature review to extend previous non-responder work to reading comprehension interventions and to include older students. We situate our work within two theoretical frameworks of reading: the simple view of reading and the direct and indirect effects model of reading. The simple view of reading posits that reading comprehension is the product of decoding and language comprehension. In other words, both word and comprehension level skills are required for successful reading comprehension. It follows then that insufficient decoding, language comprehension, or both contribute to poor reading comprehension, suggesting that students who struggle with reading comprehension can be of two subtypes: those who struggle with reading comprehension while having no decoding deficits, or those who struggle with both comprehension and decoding. The direct and indirect effects model of reading further articulates the components of the simple view by suggesting that listening comprehension and word reading completely mediate the relations of inferencing, comprehension monitoring, perspective taking, grammatical knowledge, vocabulary, and working memory to reading comprehension. As such, the instructional needs of any combination of these identified domain general cognitive and language and literacy constructs may in fact influence the extent to which a learner benefits from intensive reading comprehension instruction. The following research questions guided this review. What are the domain general cognitive and language and literacy characteristics of K-12 students who show non-response to intensive reading comprehension interventions designed for students at risk for or identified with reading disabilities? Do these characteristics vary by the reading comprehension difficulty type, specifically students with specific comprehension deficits, or students with both word and comprehension level deficits? And do these characteristics vary by the grade level of the learner? Inclusion criteria for this literature review are as follows. Participants needed to be in grades K through 12. Participants must be at risk for or identified with a reading disability. They must have received an intensive reading comprehension intervention. Responsiveness to this intensive intervention must have been determined by a measure of reading comprehension. The study must provide sufficient information on the domain general cognitive or language and literacy characteristics of the non-responders, and the intervention must have been focused on reading in the English language and have been delivered in English. In total, over 1,200 manuscripts were reviewed, resulting in 9 studies meeting inclusion criteria. Of those included, all used a multi-component intensive reading intervention. There were a total of 1,300 participants in grades 1 through 9, with 7 studies including participants at the elementary grades. All students were with or at risk for learning disabilities and reading comprehension. 3 studies included participants who also identified as having ADHD, while 7 studies included participants who were identified as being ELL or having limited English. Intervention group size ranged from 1 to 15 students, and the interventions were often delivered daily and typically lasted for about 30 minutes to 1 hour per session. The range of interventions went from 2 weeks to the entire school year. Results of my review align well with what would be predicted by both the simple view of reading and the direct and indirect effects model of reading. In general, the results suggest that non-responders to reading comprehension intervention can be distinguished from responders by performance on measures of language and literacy constructs, most consistently by verbal knowledge and listening comprehension skills, but generally cannot be distinguished by performance on measures of domain general cognition, especially when measures of reading are included in the model. Though often not measured, decoding skills also frequently distinguish non-responders from responders. Furthermore, non-responder subtypes were found to have different distinguishing characteristics. While only 2 of the included studies actually parsed non-responders by subtype, their results suggest that verbal knowledge and listening comprehension contribute the most to distinguishing non-responders with deficits in comprehension from responders, and from non-responders who did not have deficits in comprehension. Likewise, phonological awareness and rapid naming appear to contribute the most to distinguishing non-responders with word level deficits from responders and from non-responders who do not have deficits at the word level. Finally, while only 2 studies included participants in the secondary grades, no differences were found regarding distinguishing characteristics of non-responders based on their grade level. Given that there were only 9 studies that met inclusion criteria, more research is needed in this area. Specifically, future research should aim to evaluate the contribution of multiple domain general cognitive and language and literacy constructs suggested to be relevant by both theoretical models of reading and empirical research on predictors of reading comprehension skill. Future research should also aim to parse non-responders into subtypes of those with specific comprehension deficits and those with word and comprehension level deficits to better articulate the needs of these populations. Additional research is needed to include participants at the upper grade levels as well. Future steps in this line of research include identifying which of the identified distinguishing characteristics are amenable to instruction so that this work can ultimately be used to improve intensive interventions and hopefully decrease the number of non-responders. Thank you. I look forward to your comments and questions during the CEC Division for Learning Disabilities student poster session.